Massive drug companies are asking President Joe Biden to punish poorer countries because they had the nerve to ask for IP rights to be waived on the COVID-19 vaccines. Now, waiving the rights obviously would help these poorer countries be able to produce and distribute the vaccine, but keeping these vaccines under the control of companies like Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson hurts the ability for these countries to actually produce and deliver the vaccine to their people. And of course, these countries being vaccinated wouldn't just benefit those countries, even if that just was the benefit, good, but it wouldn't just benefit them. It would also, of course, benefit everybody, as the closer we get to a complete society, a complete world that is all vaccinated, the closer we get to getting back to somewhat of a normal life. But you have these massive companies, of course, not only just stopping this, but also wanting the countries to get punished for even daring to ask. Now, let me first reference here this article from The Conversation. As a potential remedy, calls have been made for companies to voluntarily pledge to make their intellectual property available to fight the COVID-19 emergency. The World Health Organization has also launched a voluntary pool to collect patent and other rights which could be shared for manufacturing vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics to combat the virus. South Africa and India, supported by many other developing countries which face extra difficulties accessing affordable COVID-19 treatments, are pushing for a stronger measure. They have proposed a waiver of certain parts of the TRIPS agreement, the WTO international treaty which protects intellectual property at a global level. The proposal is still under discussion. If agreed, it will allow countries to produce and use all anti-COVID-19 technologies without fear of infringing intellectual property rights. The measure would be time limited. Now, to be fair, this article also goes on to say that this wouldn't be enough. As they say here, they're saying it's not enough. But my position on this is all the above. Whatever can get more people vaccinated, do it. Waiving the IP rights would be one of the ways of getting there. Now, of course, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, essentially a voice here for these massive drug companies, are opposing the World Trade Organization waiver of vaccine intellectual property rights, saying here, quote, proposals to waive intellectual property rights are misguided and a distraction from the real work of reinforcing supply chains and assisting countries to procure, distribute, and administer vaccines to billions of the world's citizens. Quote, diminishing intellectual property rights would make it more difficult to quickly develop and distribute vaccines or treatments in the future pandemics the world will face. This is so full of crap. First off, this idea of reinforcing supply chains, this is just their way of saying, hey, we make billions of dollars off of the existing system, so the best way to move forward is to continue to reinforce the existing supply chains that make us so much money. And the idea here that diminishing IP rights would make it more difficult to quickly develop and distribute vaccines or treatments in the future, this is, again, complete BS. All you have to do is look to NASA. Look at the government investment into technology during the space race. The amount of innovation that came out of NASA during the space race is incredible. That same investment could be put into medicine, could be put into science, into developing medicine and vaccines. But instead, they have the profit motive. And by the way, a lot of that investment is still taking place. And who gets the IP rights? Private companies. So even though the government does do some investment into developing medicine, essentially that research is handed over to these private companies, and they slap their label on it, and they make the money off it. But the idea that the only way of saving lives is by ensuring that somebody makes $1 billion is just completely ridiculous. There's no basis for this whatsoever. More here from The Intercept. The drug industry has sharply criticized any attempt to share vaccine patents or the technological knowledge needed to manufacture them, despite global need. According to one estimate, wealthy countries representing just 16% of the world's population have already secured more than half of all COVID-19 vaccine contracts, and current projections show that much of the middle income and developing world will not achieve widespread vaccinations for years. some projections predict that low-income countries such as Mali, South Sudan, and Zimbabwe may not achieve significant levels of vaccination until early 2024. How is this a system that makes any sense? It doesn't. And this is the existing system. This is the system where these vaccinations are protected by IP rights. So if your goal here, if the goal of society, if the goal of all of us is to vaccinate people, is to ensure that people get to live longer, then clearly this current way of doing things is not the way to do it. The actual way to do it would be to waive these IP rights, ensure that whoever can produce the vaccine gets to produce it at mass levels and be able to distribute that vaccine to the people that need it. Waiting until 2024 is just completely unacceptable. And of course, that's not what these people care about. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce, these big pharma companies, all they care about is ensuring that they are protecting their profits. That's what guides them. What guides these other countries that are actually looking for the help is that they want their people healthy. They want to ensure that their people have the vaccine. So, look, this is whenever you analyze a story like this, you have to look at what the actual goals of the individuals in the story are. The goal of a massive company, a massively profitable healthcare company, big pharma company, is to increase profits. The goal of countries like South Africa and India in this situation here is to ensure that their citizens have the vaccine. So looking at it through that lens, it's clear who is on the correct side of this issue. Now, Bernie Sanders, of course, one of the few lawmakers coming out and calling on Joe Biden to waive these IP rights, tweets out here, "It is outrageous that amid a global pandemic, major pharmaceutical companies are lobbying to protect billions in profits. I urge the Biden administration to support the proposal to waive vaccine-related IP rights at the WTO to rapidly expand supplies of vaccines." Common Dreams writing here, despite garnering support from more than 100 countries, the waiver push has run up against opposition from powerful nations such as the US, the UK, and Canada, which have thwarted the will of a supermajority of WTO member nations in order to ensure that pharmaceutical corporations retain monopoly control over coronavirus vaccine technology. So just to be clear here, you have over 100 countries asking to waive the IP rights of this vaccine so that it can be mass produced and delivered to everyone that needs it. Yet you have here 3 countries, the US, the UK, and Canada, thwarting the will of 100 plus countries because these 3 countries have more power within the World Trade Organization. It's clear here what's going on. You have these countries benefiting from the current system, these massive companies, massive drug companies, existing within these 3 nations, holding power over the governments of these 3 countries and dictating how this vaccine gets rolled out. Meanwhile, you have these countries, some countries waiting until 2024 potentially to actually get vaccinated. Now, the top line here, drug lobby asks Biden to punish foreign countries pushing for low-cost vaccines. So it's not enough for these companies to reject the idea of waiving the IP rights of these vaccines. No, they have to go even further. They want to actually punish the countries for even daring to ask about waiving IP rights so that their citizens can also get the vaccine. It shows you how disgusting this industry is and why healthcare, medicine needs to be completely decommodified. More here from The Intercept. The Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America, or Pharma, another drug lobby group, requested the Biden administration pursue a variety of enforcement initiatives, and use all available tools and leverage to ensure America's trading partners do not suspend traditional intellectual property rights in the fight against the coronavirus. Bio and Pharma represent the largest drug firms in the world, including Pfizer, Gilead Sciences, and Johnson & Johnson. The 2 groups collectively spent more than $38 million lobbying federal officials last year, and member companies maintain extensive ties to prominent think tanks Lawmakers and academics active in shaping the policy response to the pandemic. Other drug industry funded groups such as the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the National Association of Manufacturers, the Alliance for Trade Enforcement, and the Intellectual Property Owners Association made similar demands to the administration to take action against countries that challenged corporate intellectual property rights in response to the pandemic. Albert Bourla, the CEO of Pfizer, mocked proposals for sharing intellectual property as nonsense and dangerous at an industry forum last year. The vaccines are netting drug companies $21 billion this year alone, according to one estimate by Bernstein Research. People have this crazy idea that the only way a life-saving vaccine can exist is if there are companies making $21 billion. That's just not true. There is absolutely no reason for the profit motive to be in healthcare. You already see countries all over the world, they've decommodified the healthcare process. Healthcare is decommodified for millions of people around the world. Yet, when it comes to medicine, they want to maintain this idea that the only way we can innovate, the only reason anybody would create a life-saving vaccine is if I can make $1 billion. How disgusting is that? And you see what the process leads to. These poor countries having to wait, some having to wait till 2024. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.